In Season 2, Episode 5 of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, Spock and Nurse Chapel get caught in a shuttle accident where an alien species rewrites Spock's DNA so that he's fully human and then has to face dinner with his future in-laws. This episode sucks and shows exactly why prequels are extremely difficult to make and usually you shouldn't bother. Now, Spock is arguably the most important character in the franchise. He's got the Starfleet career, but while James T. Kirk dies in the Nexus at a relatively young age, Spock continues. He works as an ambassador and has the goal of Romulan-Vulcan reunification. In Strange New Worlds, they've definitely gone for comedy Spock. In the first series, there's Spock Amok, where he gets to body swap with his fiancée. There's the Serene Squall, where he has a tongue sandwich with Nurse Chapel on the bridge. But don't worry, it's just a joke. And then in this series, we have Charades, where he becomes human and must go through some Vulcan rituals to make his unreasonable mother-in-law happy. Now, this is a plot that recycles Deep Space Nine. Worf and Jadzia Dax had a similar thing in the episode You Are Cordially Invited. I don't have any inherent problem with characters recycling plots. We could probably find dozens of examples throughout the Star Trek franchise. So let's park that particular aspect of the episode for the moment and come back to it later. I want to talk about what this means for the character of Spock. So Spock has his Vulcan DNA removed. He's now completely human. Let's have a look at the Star Trek Voyager episode, Season 2, Episode 16, Meld, for an example of what happens when Vulcans lose control of themselves. Commander Tuvok is investigating a murder and is confused by the apparent lack of motive. He asks to mind meld with the murderer and finds himself losing control of his emotions. As he starts to spiral out of control, Tuvok creates a holodeck program where he can indulge his violent fantasies, which involve specific members of the crew. He then isolates himself in his apartment, removes his own security clearances, and when he's taken to sickbay, he threatens to delete the doctor and threatens the life of a crew member.
Release the force field, and I'll kill him for you.
Throughout the Star Trek franchise, viewers have been told that Vulcans are dangerous people. Their emotions are dangerous. They have a tight grip on them because they will hurt people if they don't keep that grip. So what do we see in Charades when Spock loses his Vulcan side?
Captain, what is that amazing smell?
Oh, it's the bacon.
Well, he becomes kind of weak.
Smoky and salty and sweet and soft and crispy all at the same time.
Kind of harmless. Doesn't really seem to have any negative emotions. But why does this matter, would you ask? It's a fun episode, the characters are interesting, Spock comes through in the end, he gets through the ritual. Why is this a bad thing? For me, it's a bad thing because it destroys the biggest relationship in the series, the relationship between Spock and Pike. We know how Captain Pike's story will end. In the early days of Kirk's captaincy of the Enterprise, Spock will steal the ship and take the horrifically wounded Captain Pike to Talos 4 so he can live the rest of his life in happiness. And why is Pike so badly wounded? Because that's the deal that he made with the Klingon monks in Discovery so that he could get the time crystal. And this actually gets retconned slightly. It gets altered in the Season 1 finale, A Quality of Mercy, which I think should have really been the first episode. So in A Quality of Mercy, Pike starts a war with the Romulans, in which Spock dies. He keeps trying to change the timeline, but every time Spock dies. And Pike thinks that Spock can't die. In Pike's word,
He's got things to do.
presumably this is referring to the Vulcan-Romulan reunification that he spends the last part of his life on.
Fate of the galaxy type things.
I don't like this in terms of Pike because it shows him trying to weasel his way out of the agreement that he made with the Klingon monks. It shows him trying to avoid his fate, specifically by writing letters to the people involved so that they wouldn't be there that day. And that leaves me questioning Pike's integrity. I also don't like it on the part of Spock because I struggle to believe that Pike would still go through with the accident for this version of the character.
I would like the ship to go. Now.
For this kind of weak teenage Spock, rather than a dangerous Vulcan. Why would Pike do that? I just don't buy it. And for me, this is the problem with prequels. There's so much room to actually damage the characters. I mentioned earlier that Charades rips off the Deep Space Nine episode, You Are Cordially Invited, and by itself, this is not a bad thing. There are lots of examples of concepts being reused. So, Strange New Worlds, it starts off with a first contact going wrong. They hide in a star or nebula. There's the Shore Leave episode. There's the pirates. There's the sentient life form in space. They lose their memories. There's an alternate timeline. Someone steals the ship. There's an alternate timeline again. They lose their memories again. And repeating all this within the show and from different shows is fine, so long as you match character to the right plot. So my favourite episode of Strange New Worlds, Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, takes La'an Noonien Singh back in time to protect one of her own ancestors. So she has the personal connection there. She also works in security, so it's believable that she would be willing to do what it takes to protect him. We've also seen her deal with the Gorn very effectively in previous episodes. Putting Spock in Charades destroys the character in this particular context. We need to believe that Spock is such a strong, useful and intelligent person that Pike is willing to effectively die for him. And this episode is the total opposite of that. Imagine, instead of Spock getting married, it was Ortegas. I'd be totally up for enjoying that as a comedy episode. Star Trek Discovery had similar issues with being so close to the timeline of the original series. And at the beginning, Discovery had an interesting concept, a secret means of propulsion, a weird captain, and didn't share any characters with the original series, but still felt it had to solve its problems by catapulting the story 900 years into the future. So Strange New Worlds looks like it's going to be Star Trek's Kenobi, taking legacy characters that you should be able to absolutely knock out of the park and destroy them, or at best, make people not care about them. The only way to do a direct sequel that's so close to the original is, I think, the Rogue One approach, which ties the plot very nicely into Episode 4 A New Hope, but has completely different characters. I think this is the only way to do it. Personally, I'd much rather see the franchise move forward, as Star Trek Picard Season 3 suggested it could do. But if you insist on doing a prequel, then shove it backwards in time. Think about, for example, The Godfather Part 2, both a prequel and a sequel, which allows to see in parallel the progress of the father and the son. Think of Star Trek Enterprise, which by the time it found its feet, much too late in Season 4, was able to have a lot of fun with the Star Trek universe. Think about Better Call Saul, which gave us the origin of the character from Breaking Bad, but didn't change anything from the original series, because it left enough of a time gap that the audience was trusted to use its imagination.